So probably the most important thing you can possibly do before starting some sort of project is to gather a good reference. And this is something that gets skipped way too often. And I've done it too. Somebody will give me some sort of job and I'll be really excited about it. And so I jump right into 3D. Or maybe I'm given some sort of schedule that's really tight and I feel like I don't have time to get a good reference. But more often than not, this leads to problems later on. And at the end of the day, it would have been faster to have just gotten the good reference in the first place. Like I'll hit some sort of wall, or I'll make something really fast, but it just doesn't look right, and I can't figure out why. So if you get good reference at the very beginning of your project, you'll avoid all kinds of problems that occur later on. Now, reference can be split into two categories. There's original sources and process sources. And original sources are things like real photos that you've taken yourself or other people have taken or something you have observed. And process sources are stuff like other people's paintings, other people's 3D images, films, that kind of thing. And in general, I recommend as often as possible to get original sources. Process sources are still useful as reference, but it's somebody's already taken their own reference and they've digested it and they've put their own spin on it, and so you're not really getting the real thing. You're getting something that's already once removed from the real thing. So while certainly useful, if you can get real photos, especially if you can get your own real photos, that's really much more useful as far as reference goes. Now, there's a lot of places you can get reference. You can take your own photos, which is the very best, I believe. And one of the most important things you can own as a shading or texture person is a camera. And it doesn't even have to be a very good camera. It can be a cheapo camera. In fact, sometimes that's even better, because if you have a small, compact, throwaway camera, you'll probably carry it with you more often, and that'll give you a chance to maybe get a photo of something that you wouldn't normally have gotten a photo of if you were trying to lug around some sort of big, expensive camera. So another good place to get reference is a client, if you have a client. Also getting photos from the library or books or websites. Films, another good spot to get reference. Other artists' work. So once you've gathered all this reference, you'll want to create something called an archive, or what some people call a morgue, which is just an area where you keep all sorts of reference on all kinds of different things. So this can be on your computer. It can also be in some sort of scrapbook or just a personal library. And this is where you want to put every bit of reference you can possibly get your hands on, even things that you haven't actually done a project on, because it can be really helpful if when somebody asks you to build something you've never built before, you already have a bunch of reference and you don't need to necessarily go out and get new stuff. Just to give you some idea, my personal archive is about 92,000 files, which are images and bits of movies and all kinds of other things. About 41 gig of information. And it's constantly growing every day. And then one quick note, if you can reuse your own work from previous projects, assuming there's no legal reason that you can't do it, like, a client owns the work or something like that, it's really useful to go back to your old projects and see what you can grab from there and use in your current project, because it'll help you do it faster. So once you have your reference, the next thing is identifying the visual details. And that is making a list of the 5 to 10 things that make an object look the way it looks and write them down. And this helps you really focus what are the tasks you're going to need to replicate when you want to make this object in 3D. So let me just go through 2 quick examples. The first one will be this rock, which was taken at a beach reasonably near my house. So if you want to describe this to somebody by explaining its details, you probably say, okay, well, it's a rough surface, so it's not shiny. You're not seeing any big reflections on it like you would, say, off the water. You might say, okay, well, look at these cracks. There are cracks all over the surface. There's also a large crinkly bump which sort of covers the entire surface around the cracks. Then if you zoom up closer to it, you'll see that there's a smaller grainy bump, which is about the size of a pixel here. So you wouldn't see in this photo, but you would if you got closer to your object. Then maybe you'd go for color. You'd say, okay, well, it's sort of gray with a little bit of yellow, and then there's sort of a spotty color pattern, like it's a little darker here and it's a little bit lighter there. So there you go. I just done a list of the things that if you were to replicate all these things, you would have something that looks pretty similar to the original rock. Now here's another example, a fire hydrant. So if you had to describe the surfaces on this, you'd say, to start off, there is three different colors. There is the yellow, there is a gray color, and then some green. That's paint color, of course. The paint is slightly reflective, so you can see in here there is the reflection of the sky. So unlike the rock previously, this is a slightly reflective surface. The paint has a slight bump to it. You can see, if you look closely, that there is some grain going on inside the paint. The paint chips off to reveal metal undercoating. You can see in here there's metal going on, and then there's paint over top of it. The metal base is dull dark gray with a little bit of reflectivity. You can see a little bit of white in there, and that's a reflection of the sky again. And then there are different sorts of rusts in various spots. So there's rust under here, a bunch of rust there, rust sort of dripping in this area. So there's another visual details list. So now that we have our list of visual details, we need to decide which shaders we're going to need to replicate these details, and also which patterns we're going to need to replicate these details.